Hey guys, in an earlier video I said that free blacks fought for the North. Well, that was something of an oddity, and let's talk about why today. As I said before, we all know that in the 1800s, slaves have no rights. They're basically property. They have a title with an owner's name on it. If they escape, they're returned. It's just like if your dog runs away and you have it microchipped, your dog belongs to you. Well, even worse, free blacks don't have the same rights as white people. They're not able to be citizens, and they can be sold into slavery if someone decides that they look like they need to be kidnapped and sold to the South. We've also talked a lot about the Three-Fifths Compromise. We talked about the Fugitive Slave Act. And we've talked about this idea of popular sovereignty, where if the people want slavery in new territories, they can get it. The problem is that a lot of people are going to want slavery, and they're going to be willing to do whatever they have to get it. And the federal government recognizes that. Now, I haven't really given you guys a lot of background information on the Civil War, but what you really need to know is the Civil War runs from 1861 to 1865. It was a direct result of Lincoln's inauguration, him becoming the president of popular sovereignty, of the expansion of slavery out west. We have talked a lot about the fact that the Americans don't always get along. Popular sovereignty, manifest destiny, those two ideas really kind of push the country towards war. Well, in 1861, when Lincoln gets elected and he is declared the president, he's inaugurated, what happens is the South, several states decide to secede. On April 12th of 1861, Confederate warships fire upon a Union fort in South Carolina known as Fort Sumter. The fort was occupied by federal troops, and South Carolina wanted the federal government of the United States to turn over all federal property to the Confederacy. Well, for the next couple of years, there's going to be some heavy fighting. The South is going to win. Pretty much every major battle in the first 2 years of the war, the South's tacticians, their generals, are way more capable and way smarter than the North's. They're much more willing to take gambles and to roll the dice. This is going to cost the Union majorly, and Lincoln is put in a position where he could very well lose the war. He's waiting for the right moment to really flip the script on the South. In 1862, the Union's really first just critical turn point victory is going to be the Battle of Antietam, or Sharpsburg in Maryland. It is Lee's first attempt to invade the North, and it is a total failure for him as well as for the Union, even though they technically win. The Union suffers heavy casualties, but Lincoln seizes on this opportunity. This is his chance to be able to kind of turn the war from being about keeping the Union into making it about slavery, that big concept, that tough, ugly topic that we have talked about. Well, Lincoln has written this document called the Emancipation Proclamation. Immediately after Sharpsburg or Antietam, he decides that this is his chance to issue it, to let the people know exactly what he's thinking about slavery. Now, I know we've all heard of Lincoln as the great emancipator. We have all heard that Lincoln did really fantastic things to help free the slaves, and that's true to a degree. However, it is not as simple as we like to think it is. So, Lincoln's proclamation only affects slaves in the South and the rebellious states. The way Lincoln saw it was that the Confederacy wasn't actually a separate country. No other foreign nations had recognized them, so to him, they were still under his authority, even though they were rebelling. Now, I know what you're thinking. All the slaves are in the South. Lincoln freed all the slaves. But that's not true. Most of the border states, including Kansas, Maryland, they had slaves, and those slaves were not free. The blue states on the map represent free territories and states. The yellow are going to be the Confederate, and the pink are going to be the border states I just talked about. Constitutionally, Lincoln could not free them because they were not federal property. They were private property, and the government could not enact a law that forces people to relinquish their property. So what Lincoln did not impact slaves held in the Union territories. It only affected slaves in the rebellious states in the South. And he gave them an ultimatum, and he said, if by January the 1st you all have not laid down your arms and voluntarily returned to the Union, then I will forcibly come in and take your slaves away and set them free. This proclamation made the South feel even more justified. Just like they had been afraid of in 1860, Lincoln was an abolitionist. He decides that he's going to flip the script on the South, and he's going to make the war a moral one. Instead of just being about reunification, the war is now about slavery. All of the people up north who originally did not want to reunify with the South, a lot of abolitionists felt that reunification wasn't an option until the South laid down their arms and gave up their slaves. Well, now those people are going to wind up backing the war because they're seeing it now as a chance to do the greatest good for the most people and to free all of the slaves. Without the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln may have lost the war. That proclamation does a couple different things. The first thing is that he stops foreign involvement on the side of the South. Britain and France for decades had already banned slavery, but they were looking at joining with the South to not only punish the United States, but also to give them access to cheap cotton. The United States during this time period is the #1 exporter of cotton, and they felt that if they joined up with the South, there was the chance that they would wind up with cheap material in order to make manufactured goods. Once again, it all goes back to that money. It all goes back to that precious dollar bill, because that is going to be what drives almost every decision in the history of humanity. The second thing the Emancipation Proclamation does is it sets up a chance for the freed blacks to be able to fight in the army. By the end of the war, somewhere between 180 and 200,000 free blacks served in the military. However, serving for a free black man was not the same as serving as a white man. Most of the time, freed blacks were put in support roles. They were not given combat roles or even issued weapons in a lot of cases. Sometimes they were put in place as maybe nurses' aides, or maybe they were hauling supplies, maybe they rowed boats. But a lot of times they did not get the same chance to serve their country that a white man would have gotten. The third and final thing the Emancipation Proclamation does is it paved the way for the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. This is not a law. The president did not write the law. A lot of people think the Emancipation Proclamation was a law. Laws are not written by the president. Laws are written by Congress, and the president signs them. However, this is an executive order, what we call a fiat, an executive order. They are going to basically be where the president, starting with Andrew Jackson, wants to get something accomplished, bypasses Congress. As long as it doesn't conflict with the Constitution, they can declare an executive action. Well, that is exactly what Lincoln does, and it gives him the ability to secure some foreign aid. It draws more of the North onto the side of the war, and at the end of it, it helps to establish equal rights for blacks after the war. But wait, I thought segregation and other things took the place of equal rights after the war. I didn't think blacks had equal rights after the war. Well, you're not wrong. And we're going to talk about that when we get to Jim Crow, when we get to black codes, the KKK during Reconstruction. Institutionalized racism has really only vanished in about the last 60 or 70 years. Institutionalized racism no longer exists in the United States because it is not codified in the law system. But you're right, the fight to get 100% equal rights under the law continued on for almost 100 years after the Civil War, and we will definitely talk about that before the end of the year.